Okay, so in part one, I talked about getting started with problem-solving techniques. So we looked at reading the question. That's really the key. If you don't read the question, you can't possibly get the answer right. If you can't read the specification, if you can't understand the specification, you can't possibly get the question right or the answer right or the solution right. Okay, so we looked at these techniques in part one: divide and conquer, storyboarding, and read the question, underlining the keywords. All very important problem-solving techniques. They're not the only problem-solving techniques. There's plenty of other ones. For example, there's prototyping, where you develop little prototypes and say, "Is this what you mean? Is this how you want it to work?" And those sorts of things. So there's plenty of other ones, but I mainly focus on these three. And really, prototyping is kind of storyboarding. It's storyboarding with the stakeholders next to you, perhaps, or the user next to you, or the people next to you that want the system. And you can ask some questions live. Is this what you meant? Is this how you want it to work? Where would you like this placed? All that sort of stuff. So prototyping is a very powerful technique as well, and storyboarding is kind of like that as well. Okay, so what I thought I'd do in part two is just expand on the divide and conquer a little bit. I didn't really spend a lot of time on divide and conquer in the first episode, so I think I'm going to look at that some more. So let's go down and look at the screens. We had a screen here, and there was two buttons. There was check if exists and save to DB. So let's see if we can flesh these out a bit and see if we can get some pseudo code going. Okay, so check if exists, and we're going to write the pseudo code. So pseudo code is not Java code, it's not SQL, it's something that might look a little bit like either, but it's just code to help us understand what we want in concise form. Okay, so it's just bullet points really is all pseudo code is, or that sort of thing. So check if exists. What does that mean? So they've typed in a vehicle number here, and we want to check if exists. Well, the first thing we want to do is check is what the user typed in, is the vehicle number the right length. In other words, do you want that to be 6 characters or 7 characters or whatever? Is it a minimum 3, maximum of 10? What is it? So is the vehicle number the right length? Is what the user typed in the right length? And you might have a range. It might be between 5 characters and 6 characters, or 5 characters and 8 characters, depending on your country. Okay, so you need to work out what's right there. And if not, then you want to display an error and return. And by return, I mean don't do any more processing. So stop any further processing. Just return back to the user. Let the user do whatever they want on the user interface. Okay. If yes, if it is the right length, then you can do further checking. For example, you can look in database and see if vehicle exists. Okay, so we're talking about two main tables. There was a vehicle table and a parking event table. So this table here would contain the vehicles, and this one here would contain the parking events for each vehicle. So here, if yes, look in the database and see if vehicle exists. So that means query the vehicle table. That's really what that means. Okay, so we'll do some sort of select query there and look in that table and see if whatever the user typed in this text field exists in a database. Okay, and if it does exist, then we've got the vehicle in the database already. And if they're not in a database, we need to add them to the database. So here, if vehicle not in database, prompt user to add them. In other words, display a dialog to the user. Are you sure you want to add this vehicle to the database? Prompt user to say to confirm they want to add the vehicle. Okay, so we're going to pop up a confirmation dialog and say, do you want to add the vehicle to the database or not? Okay, so check if exists. That's pretty well all it will do. Okay, now can we yet turn this into Java code or into whatever programming language you want? And I would suggest the answer is probably no. We're not ready to write the code yet. Okay, for example, is the vehicle number the right length? You might want to flesh that out more and say, well, so the vehicle number entered by user must be between 5 and 7 characters long. Okay, and if you want to enforce other rules, you can as well. For example, maybe your registration codes need to start with 3 digits and finish with 3 letters, or whatever you want to do anyway. But I would suggest that the minimum check would be to check it's the right length. That would be the minimum amount of checking you should do. Okay, if you want to do more checking, that's fine. Okay, so now we're ready to about to turn that. We can probably write the code for that now. Okay, so if what the user typed into the vehicle number text field is between 5 and 7 characters, everything's fine. If not, display an error and return. And if everything's fine, then we can look in the database and see if the vehicle exists. So we want to query the vehicle table. So maybe you want to do something like, and here's where you can start sort of thinking about the SQL. Select something from a table. I'm not going to give anyone the answers where certain conditions are met. Okay, so you want to work on that sort of query. And this might be where the vehicle number in the database field matches this one. Okay, so you want to fill in the details of that query there, and then check the result of that query. If the vehicle's not in a database, prompt the user to confirm they want to add the vehicle. So that would be a show confirmation dialog. Show confirmation dialog. Okay, so show confirmation dialog, and if they type yes, they want to add the user, then it would be some sort of insert statement. Insert. Okay, so you'd be inserting data into the database. Okay, so let's check if it exists. We've now fleshed that out enough. For me, as a programmer, that would be enough for me to write the code now for that button. If you want to flesh it out more, by all means, go down and flesh it out more. You might want to, you might want to make sure you get the SQL right and test that in isolation. Test that against the database without doing it through your Java code, for example. Okay, so the idea is you keep breaking down the steps until you understand everything and you can write the code. Okay. Okay, let's do the next button. So create parking event, or save to DB. There we go, save to DB. So there is a save to DB button, so maybe we would, maybe that's part of that as well. So we've got save to DB. Okay, so if the vehicle doesn't exist, display an error and return. Okay, it's hard working in such a small screen. I'm recording in a small screen to make the video smaller, so people can watch it on lower bandwidth. So check if exists. Definitely got to do those first 2 bits to check if exists. And if it's not the right length, display an error return. If it is the right length, look in the database, see if it exists. Okay. And then, so if the vehicle's not in a database, we might want to enable these 2 fields. Enable that field, vehicle type, and enable owner's name field, data entry. So we're just enabling the fields that might be on the GUI. So we're enabling, if the vehicle's not in a database, we're going to enable those 2 fields and also enable a save to DB button. Okay. If yes, if vehicle not in database, if vehicle is in the database, then we want to disable those fields. Okay, so get their input there, check if it exists, they click the check if it exists button, and that controls whether these next 2 fields are enabled or disabled. Okay, and then we come down to save to DB. So save to DB is the next one. So what do we want to do there? Okay, so save to DB, we want to check that none of these fields are blank. Okay, or I'll check that the vehicle type is selected and the other two inputs aren't blank. So save to DB. Sorry, save to DB should go down here. So when I click the Save to DB button, we check if the vehicle number is the right length again. We can check it again. Maybe you don't need to check it again, but you should definitely check it at least once up here. Okay, is owner's name data entry valid? And what do we mean by that? So I'll let you work out some rules here for whether the owner's name is valid. Maybe it's got to be a minimum of 3 characters long for the owner's name. Has a van or as a vehicle type been selected? In other words, we're using that drop down or combo box. So has the user selected anything in our little combo box there? And so if not, if the vehicle number is not the right length, we want to display an error and return. If the owner's name is not valid, and maybe we want to check for minimum 3 chars or something like that, minimum 3 chars long. And if the owner's name is not valid, display an error and return. In other words, don't do any further processing. And if a vehicle type has not been selected, then display an error and return as well. Please select a vehicle type. Okay, so we're checking all the inputs here before we save the database. And then when all of that's done, we want to then prompt the user to confirm that we want to save the data to the vehicle, the data to the database. Add the vehicle to the database. Just confirm with the user, and then show a confirmation dialog if you like. That's how you would do that. And then you would do an insert statement. Okay, so again, save to DB, we're checking our inputs, making sure things have been selected properly, and then prompting the user to confirm they do want to save the vehicle to the database. So show confirm dialog, and then there will be some sort of insert SQL. Okay, now if any of those things aren't clear, what you could do is break them down even further. So more bullet points, for example. But I think that's pretty clear. I think anyone could probably write the code from that now. Okay, but if you do need more, if you don't understand any steps, break them down. Add more steps in here. Say what you need to do. Okay, and if you end up with any of these steps that aren't fully clear to you, break them down and describe what you need to do. So you're getting more and more detailed descriptions and specifications as you go. Okay. That's the whole idea of divide and conquer. Keep breaking a problem down until you understand it fully. Okay, so we might just do one more. Calculate charges. So we're getting the start date and time for the current parking event for that vehicle. What does that mean? From the database. So we want to do a select from the database to get the start date time back for that vehicle's parking event. We want to get the current date time, and in Java you do that with equals new date. Okay, so that's how you do it in Java. The total park time is worked, is the hours that the vehicle was parked, so it's current date time minus start date time. So how do you do that in Java? Well, you could look at the Java help here, and there's various methods in here. So you can use a date class, and that's got a lot of useful methods in it. Java util.date. There's a lot of useful methods in a date class. Or another good one to use, instead of using dates, you could maybe change to local date. Local date, that's a really useful class in Java too. And that's got a whole lot of functions in here to help you work out the difference between two dates. They're in a date class as well, but they're not quite as well defined in the date class, and some of them have been deprecated, which means you shouldn't be using them anymore. So maybe check out local date as well. Okay, but I won't give you any more information. That's good hints about where you need to go. So maybe date or maybe local date. But either of those will get you what you need to work out the hours between two date times. Okay, so work out the hours parked. So it'll be double hours equals current date time minus start date time. And you might need to call some functions in either the date class or the local date class to help you do that. You can't just subtract them directly like that. That won't work. Okay, so you'll need to do some other processing to maybe call some built-in functions that are built into Java in one of those classes, or maybe both of those classes. Okay, and then displaying the total charges. Okay, so we need to also work out what the vehicle type was. So we need to get the vehicle type, because there's different rates of buses and vans and cars from the database. So that's another select statement. So you could start thinking about that select statement as well. And then you want to get, then you can work out the charges. So charges, double charge equals the hours times the rate. Okay, we still haven't got the rate yet. So determine rate based on vehicle type. And we had that table in the specification there where cars were something like $10 an hour and vans are something like $20 an hour. So you'd have a little this if, else, if, else, if, else, if to work out the rate. And then you would multiply by the hours. And that would give you the charges. So you could display the charges there. And the park time there, which is at hours. Okay, so 3.5 hours or 3.75 hours, whatever. And you could get the user to choose a card or cash radio button, and then save payment. We could do a little breakdown for save payment as well. Save payment. So we're saving the payment to the database, but what do we need to do? Okay, and that's as far as I'm going to talk in these videos. So just break the problem down, divide and conquer. Understand the next little bit of the problem and break it down into steps. And just keep breaking it down into steps and breaking it down into further steps until you're ready, until you understand the problem enough to write the code. Okay, that's what divide and conquer is. So once again, if you just follow these three simple techniques, you'll be able to solve any programming problem that you come across. Providing the information's there. If the information's there, then you might need to use other techniques. For example, information gathering, user interviews, and there's a whole lot of other techniques as well. And if you can't get the information that way, there's other things you can do as well. But there's a whole avenue of stuff here. But you've been given a specification here, so those three techniques should be more than enough to help you solve the problem and work through the problem. And if there's not, just talk to your lecturer or tutor and ask some questions. You know, what do you mean by this? How should we tackle that? What would you like us to do here? You know, those sorts of questions. And then you can flesh out the requirements more and fill in some more details down here in your pseudo code. Okay, but once you got the pseudo code to the state where you feel comfortable writing the code, that's when you write the code. Okay. I hope that was useful. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.